Okay, why don't we start from the other side? Debbie, you guys introduce yourselves, please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. I am not a politician. I am a mother, a proud Hispanic immigrant, a wife, and a community advocate. And I'm running for State Senate District 39.
And hi, my name is Flores. I am a lifelong South Floridian. I'm the mom of 2 young boys. Maximo is 8 and Lucas is almost 5. He'll have you know that very much. And I'm also the wife of a small business owner. My husband is a contractor. I am currently a state senator, but due to redistricting, the district changed, and it now will include all of Monroe County, and look forward to your questions.
Before we get into questions, I'll clarify. We actually have an open seat because our state senator, Dwight Bullard, decided to, with the redistricting, his district got split up. I'm looking at Robin because he knows more about this than me. And Dwight decided to run for a district that was more in his hometown, which left us sort of open. So now we have great options. And one little disclaimer, and Terry and I are extremely tangentially connected in a charter school organization. So there's no direct connection, it's worth putting it out there. Bill, start out.
Okay, Senator Flores. The Supreme Court says marriage equality is the law of the land, yet we've seen state legislators around the country attempt to counter this with various laws that enable people to refuse to marry same-sex couples. Would you support laws to that effect that if they came before you for a vote?
Thank you very much. I do agree. The Supreme Court has stated very clearly that marriage equality is something that is in our country, and it is something that is here to stay. And I support what the Supreme Court has said. I believe that in a religious ceremony, in a private religious ceremony, that is something that potentially is different, and we've had votes on that just this last year, but that's very different than being supportive of the Workforce Competitive Act, which is something that Representative Holly Rashine sponsored in the House of Representatives. Senator Joe Abruzzo sponsored in the Senate. I was supportive of that. Unfortunately, it did not pass in the legislature this year, but it is something that I would be supportive of because discrimination does not have a place anywhere in our workforce, nor in housing.
Here's where I stand. I don't think government has a say in who we choose to love and what happens in our bedrooms. I think that unlike my opponent, who has voted against gay marriage and also gay adoption, I would support fully the rights of the LGBT community, especially when it comes to the Workforce Act. It is not right that we live in a state right now that people can be fired from their job just because of gender identity or sexual preference. So I can assure you that I will be representing the LGBT community when I'm elected in Tallahassee, when I go to Tallahassee on November 9th. Thank you.
Mrs. Flora, both of you, starting with State Senator, in 2012 race, you're quoted as saying you did not support ending the embargo with Cuba. Wouldn't normalization benefit the economies of Monroe and the Miami-Dade counties and the Cuban people?
Thank you very much. Of course, normalizing relations with Cuba is something that is a federal issue, but of course I still have an opinion. I strongly believe, and we've seen this in the last year, that normalizing relations in Cuba have not been beneficial to the Cuban people. In fact, those of you who are here from Marathon and across the Keys can testify to the fact that since the president announced his changes, there have been more people showing up on rafts every single day in the last year and a half, fleeing communism in Cuba to cut to freedom. And that is something that's a fact that the Coast Guard will tell you and that officials across Marathon will tell you. And so for me, I think it's more important to continue with freedom. I believe freedom does not have an economic price in our country. But having said that, it is a federal issue.
Debbie?
I'm in full support of Obama's plan to open relations and dialogue with Cuba. As you said, it's going to be economically beneficial, specifically to Monroe County more than anything. When it comes to freedom, my opponent brings up freedom, and I don't think that her voting record has really expressed that. Freedom of choice for women, freedom to love in our bedrooms. individual freedoms in the workplace. So I fully support. My values are aligned with the values of the Democratic Party, which is to open relationship and dialogue with Cuba.
This question will be for Senator Flores. In your campaign literature and on your website, and you're obviously somebody that is promoting yourself as an environmental steward, and something that you seem to take seriously. However, big sugar companies or big sugar interests have contributed to your campaign. So my question is, do you believe that the state has properly enforced the Polluter Pays Act against the sugar industry in Central Florida? And if not, what action will you take as senator to address the pollution that's generated by big sugar?
Thank you. I'm very proud of my environmental record in the state. In fact, the Everglades Trust has endorsed my candidacy over that of my opponents because they know that I've been a strong voice in the state when it comes, for example, to the issue of fracking. There is not fracking expanded across the state of Florida because I've stood up to big interests on that issue. And I was a deciding vote twice in a row, 2 different years, to ensure that we didn't have harmful fracking. The issue of polluter pays is something that we need to do more on. It's something that we need to ensure that those individuals across our state who are polluting our waters must pay for that expansion. In fact, we've also seen, lastly on the environment, that over the last years, the state of Florida has expanded its role by fully implementing the Legacy Florida bill, something that will provide at least $200 million a year for Everglades restoration, specifically for land acquisition. And the incoming state Senate president has stated very clearly that on the issue of land acquisition for land south of Lake Okeechobee, that not only have the lands been identified, but the state funding been identified to ensure that there is water storage south of the lake so that we can continue to protect Florida Bay, the Everglades, our very precious environment, because I want to make sure that it's still around here for my kids.
That question, or?
Well, no.
Gwen's up now, and it's kind of fun watching Gwen look up her answers or her questions on the fly, right as we go.
I'm studying.
That's preparation.
I mean, I would like both of you to weigh in, but the question starts with Senator Flores. I mean, you brought up private ceremonies when it comes to same-sex marriage. I mean, you helped Florida enact the pastor protection law this year, which Holly Rashine didn't vote. She voted against it. You voted for it. And I talked to a representative of Holly Rashine earlier. They just felt like it wasn't necessary. It doesn't, but it provides legal protection for somebody that they can't get sued if they don't want to marry me to like a woman. Can you just explain why we need that law? It just seems a little mean-spirited.
Well, I think it's an issue of religious freedom in a private ceremony, and that's what I said before, and I stick to that, and I think that that's very different than an issue like the Workforce Competitive Act, which was very clear in saying, I agree, the state of Florida has no place for there to be discrimination, that I as an employer cannot say that I cannot hire you simply because you are LGBT, nor deny you housing because you are LGBT, and I think that that's the difference there.
Well, and if you'd like to, I mean, how would you have voted on that? I bet I can
I would have
guess.
voted not to even waste resources, taxpayer dollars, time, energy trying to attack and put down the LGBT community. So.
Hey, Bill, and for the questioners, if we could, Anna Terry's gone first every time so far, so we need to switch it up.
Well, this is for both, but Debbie, you answer first. The Keys are a bit different than Miami-Dade, and very often politicians will say one thing in Miami, another thing down here. Has your opponent been guilty of delivering a mixed message, do you feel? In what way?
Yes, I think that, first, let me just say very quickly that I love that in Key West, in this community, that you have a forum, an open forum like this, where we have residents that can participate in the process. So I'm very excited and I feel very at home here in Key West. In Miami, we don't have anything like that. So in every issue, especially in the environmental issue, my opponent has decided to now care about the environment. She has been in the legislature now for 12 years. And my question to my opponent is, where have you been? This has been an issue that's been coming for many, many years. In 2008, the Mayfield Act was passed, where Monroe County should have received about $200 million in funding for land acquisition. This was in 2008, and we have not seen that money coming in. I think maybe at the most half. So if my opponent claims to be so caring about the environment, my question is just, where have you been? And I know that she's been receiving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from Big Sugar and a lot of other large corporations. And those are issues that are important that we need to be aware of, because I'm running to represent all of us and not just to represent a few.
Well, I've been involved in the environment since I went on beach cleanups with Governor Bob Graham. I went and spent time with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in her home prior to her passing. My mom helped found an organization in Miami called Keep Dade Beautiful. I've been involved in the environment my entire life. Perhaps some people are just starting to pay attention to it now, but that's the fact. As I mentioned several years ago, fracking interests from across the state of Florida came in and said, we are going to allow for fracking, and I said, absolutely not. It's not going to happen under my watch. Even when they came to me and said, listen, don't worry, it's not going to happen in Miami-Dade County, I said, I don't care. I'm a state senator, and I think it's very important for me to stand up for all state interests. And so it's something that I've been a consistent voice again. And lastly, on the issue of money, I will never subscribe to the issue that money drives your decisions. That's just simply not the case. I'll give you a great example. You know, I have received funding both from doctors and from attorneys, two groups that maybe they're doctors and attorneys here. You don't exactly always see each other eye to eye. The same thing goes for the issue of gaming. I'm an anti-gaming advocate, yet the gaming industry has given me money. So if they're foolish enough to support me, even though I'm not supporting them, I suppose that's their prerogative.
I'll start with Debbie, if I may. You're both strongly immersed in Miami. What have you identified as the preeminent issues in Monroe County, and what legislation would you sponsor to help this county move forward?
The more I talk to residents of Monroe, the more of affordable housing comes up, and I know that that's a very serious issue, and it's due mainly because of the rise in insurance rates. I will make sure that if I go to Tallahassee, I'm going to pass legislation, work with both sides of the aisle to make sure that we pass legislation that puts a cap on rate increases on insurance, on homeowners insurance, unlike my opponent that has for years voted to allow these insurance companies to raise rates without any caps. I can promise you that if I'm elected in November, I will make sure that that's going to be a priority for me, to make sure that we can put a cap on rate increases and deal with the issue of affordable housing.
Well, we do have a cap in rate increases. As we all know in this room, it's 10%. Unfortunately, that means that insurance companies have raised almost 10% a year, but the reason why there is a cap is because I helped push that through. So to say that I have allowed for the opposite of cap increases is just, quite frankly, not factual. In fact, this last year, I worked very closely with the folks of FIRM, several folks that may be here and around the state, to ensure that we could work on lowering insurance rates. Unfortunately, the Office of Insurance Regulation and Commissioner Altmaier decided to ignore all the facts that were presented to him and decided to increase rates by 9% in Monroe County, which is something that is unacceptable. And we've been working with the commissioner and we're going to go up to Tallahassee and meet with him to talk about the facts, present the facts once again. Also, I know that the folks at FIRM are looking at appealing the decision that was made to see how we can overturn that. Because if there is someone that has been standing up to the insurance industry for my time in the legislature, it's been me. In fact, I'm receiving an award just on Thursday for Floridians for insurance reform, because being the legislator of the year, because I've been that voice. And so I think that that's something that's very important. Of course, the issue of affordable housing is a major issue. This last year in Tallahassee, we were able to provide $20 million statewide for the issue of affordable housing. And here in Keys Community, here in the Florida Keys, something that I did, a small thing, but something that's very important to try and alleviate the issue of affordable housing, is for years Keys Community College has asked for an increased number of beds. And this year I was able to pass that legislation for them that they so desperately needed.
All right, I have a question about charter schools. Debbie, I guess you can go first, but I'd like to ask both of the candidates. Charter schools are obviously popular in Florida. They're one of the fastest growing school choice options for students and parents. How do you believe that charter schools compare with regular public schools? And do you believe the state should continue to encourage their growth and funding through public resources?
So here's the problem that I find with charter schools. I do know that there are some good charter schools that are providing good quality education to some of the students in this state. But mostly what is happening is that it's stealing public education funds that are meant to go to K through 12 and also public universities and public colleges without abiding by the same rules and regulations that the county has for public schools. So unlike my opponent, who has been working for a charter school company and earmarking hundreds of thousands of public education dollars to support a charter school for an unaccredited Trump-like university, I'm going to make sure that when I go to Tallahassee, I am committed to fully funding public schools and to making sure that we give the resources to our teachers that they need and also protecting their pension plans. Right now, our teacher salaries are one of the lowest in the country. It's a problem in this state. We can't recruit qualified teachers. I just spoke with a mother in Marathon that was telling me that their child has had the same teacher for the past 3 years in middle school because they can't find qualified teachers. I will make sure that I provide the proper funding for our public schools and that we protect our teachers' benefits and that we pay them a fair living wage.
Thank you very much. So first on the issue of schools, I believe that as parents are the ones who are the best equipped to make the best decision for their child. And that's why in the state of Florida we have some charter schools that have done some incredible jobs. And we've also seen that charter schools that are not doing the job, the state will come in and will close them down. Students that are in charter schools will take the same standardized test that they take at the traditional public school. Charter schools actually receive less funding than traditional public schools because each county school board takes 5% kind of off the top when this child goes to a charter school in order to administer that contract. So to me, I think it's very important that this is not funding for a school or for a building or for an administrator. This is funding for a child. And I agree, I think government should not have a decision on where it is that my child goes. My child's zip code should not determine what his or her future is. I think myself as a parent working with my children, we will make this best decision. And then just lastly, to talk about the Trump-like university, because I really don't understand where that has come from. And just give me 10 extra seconds if I can. I worked for last couple of years with a nonprofit school that I am incredibly proud of because it was the first in its nation that was able to completely seamlessly put the high school experience, rather the college experience, on a high school campus. This school did not get not $1 from the public. Not one child paid for tuition. And in fact, today when I was visiting
okay,
well, I'll come back to the next one.
Maybe going to last about it. Is Kelly around? We're getting some feedback. When Kelly's friend comes back, we'll get her. Gwen, go ahead. This is the last question, and then you guys will give your closing statements. Hey, Kelly.
And hi, this is for both of the candidates. I'd like to, but I have to start with Senator Flores. I mean, you've worked very hard to make it even harder in Florida for a woman to get an abortion. It's 2016, like the 24-hour waiting period, that got litigated so much. A lot of women had to reschedule their appointments. They were in tears. I mean, why is it so important to keep adding these restrictions in a state that already kind of encourages you not to have one? I mean, why is this necessary?
Listen, I think this is a very personal issue, and I think that when it comes to the safety, not just of the unborn child, but of that of the woman, I want to make sure that as a woman, that the only person who could get this type of procedure is a woman, that it be done in the safest way possible. If I can then use the remaining part of my time to finish and saying I was at Florida Keys Community College, and guess who I met? A graduate from Doral College who had her credits transfer to Florida Keys Community College and was doing so with a scholarship that was received by the university through private dollars.
Thank you. I imagine we're going to see a lot of this in the presidential debate tonight. So, on the original question.
Yeah, we're getting you warmed up for tonight, for what's coming. You know, as a woman, I take this issue very seriously. As a mother of 2 daughters, I take this issue very seriously. I will not stand for government to take away my rights as a woman to choose. There is absolutely no reason why I should tell another woman how she needs to choose or access her health care. There is no reason why we need to punish women when they're faced with such a difficult decision in their lives. I just want to remind everyone, we have a Zika crisis, and this is something that's very dangerous right now. Denying a woman who's infected with Zika the choice of whether she needs to go through with that pregnancy, and then the cost that the state is going to have to pay to taking care of that child, and the resources that we don't have in Florida. We don't have social services in Florida. Okay? You have been in the legislature for 12 years. We don't have the social services, we don't have the resources, we don't have the public education funding. There are a lot of things that we don't have in Florida, and that's where I stand.
We're doing okay on time. Before we let them do their closing statement, do you guys have any burning questions? Brian, did you?
Yeah, I have one for Debbie that worries me a bit. As a Democrat, how can you get anything accomplished in a Republican-dominated House?
I love that question. I've been asked that question several times now, and I have a very strong track record of developing strong relationships with people from both sides of the aisle. I have some very powerful Republican friends, actually, in Florida that are supporting me because they know that I'm an honest person who works with integrity, who is relentless to make sure that I achieve the goals that I put forth for myself. I am going to make sure that I work in both sides of the aisle. I can assure you that I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for my party. I will look at every issue individually. I'm going to make sure that there's dialogue and communication with my constituents because I want to represent all of you, not just a few in Tallahassee. So I'm very confident that at the beginning I'm going to work on establishing those close relationships so that I can make sure that we work together to pass legislation that we need in this state.
Okay. Since you, Debbie, why don't you go ahead and do your closing statements? 90 seconds.
I'm running for state senate because I have a different vision for Florida. I have a vision for Florida where every child gets the best quality education regardless of the zip code that they live in. I see a Florida where families are able to move forward generation after generation. I see a Florida where our communities are safe of senseless gun violence. I was affected personally by gun violence, and it's an issue that's very close and dear to my heart. I see a Florida that's progressive. I see a Florida that is representative of its residents, of its community, of the people that live here. And I am doing this to work and represent the community that I will be elected by, District 39. So I hope that I can earn your votes on November 8th. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here tonight.
Thank you. When the districts changed in January and I saw that the new part of my district was going to have Monroe County, I right away said, let's get to work and figure out what can I be doing today? What can I be doing today to start representing the people of Monroe starting today? And so I started working, and I was very successful and effective this last year, and already being an effective voice for Monroe County. So when Florida Keys Community College needed someone to go and expand the number of residential beds that they had, something that they hadn't been able to do for several years, they came to me and I worked with my Senate colleagues to ensure that residential beds would be built. When folks from across Monroe County needed help in passing the Florida Key Stewardship Act, I put my name to the bill, worked on it very hard with my colleagues across the Senate who were not necessarily in favor of it, and said, what do we need to do in order to ensure that Monroe County is going to start getting today at least $5 million a year for the next 10 years on the issue of Everglades restoration. This is only for the county. Everglades restoration, land acquisition. What can we start doing today? And when folks from Monroe County came to me and said, we need some help with our insurance rates. You have a bill, a pro-consumer property insurance bill that will help lower rates. Can you please help add on this provision that will help us? without hesitation, I said, let's do it. Even though the governor threatened that he was going to veto the bill, I said, let's move forward and let's pass that bill. So that's what I've been able to do for the last 11 months as your almost state senator, and I hope you'll give me the opportunity to do that after November.
Thank you very much.